Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Well, they're deceiving us, and it's all planned. Who am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the governments around the world and these global organizations and the global elite. They have plans they're putting into place, policies they want to put into place. And I have no doubt that there are many government bureaucrats and leaders around the world who are implementing these policies, and they're just clueless and incompetent, and they have no idea how all of this fits together. But there are other people who know exactly what they're doing, who are pushing these policies, and there's a reason they're pushing those policies. And it's important to understand what that is, because once you can see why they're doing what they're doing, all of these policies coming together, you can see it makes sense what they're trying to do, even though it's evil, in my opinion, what they're trying to do. But it helps you to, it's important to understand your enemy and understand what you're truly up against, because there is massive deception going on. So again, what am I talking about? What is driving these leaders? Is it power? Yes, no doubt about it. Power is on the agenda. Ephesians 6:12 will tell us what really is behind many of these world leaders and pushing their positions. But there's a certain belief system that is held and widely among world leaders, especially at the World Economic Forum. Any of the leaders train there, and many other people in global organizations all around the world. So what is this belief system that's driving these policies, these anti-freedom and liberty policies that are trying to take away our freedom and wrest control, maintain a global control? Well, I believe it is this right here. Many of you have heard of Malthusianism before, but for those who haven't, let's just take a look at what this is. This says Malthusianism is an economic theory advanced by the English economist and demographer Thomas Malthus, who lived from 1766 to 1834, according to which population growth will always tend to outpace the supply of food. It says, in Malthus's view, a human society free of coercive restraints is an impossible ideal because the threat of population growth will always be present. Increases in population, if unchecked, will take place in a geometric progression, while the means of subsistence will increase in only arithmetic progression. A society's population, therefore, will always expand to the limit of subsistence. So in a nutshell, what does that all mean? What are they trying to say here? Well, those who believe in Malthusianism believe that the world's population is too large and is unsupportable by the natural resources. There's a limited supply of natural resources on the earth, and those natural resources can't support the current population or a larger population than that. So when you start to see the people who think this way, I totally disagree with that. It's, I believe, a flawed theory that free market economics has shown is flawed. You go back in time 200 years ago, wood was the primary resource and coal was the primary resource of fuel and energy for much of the world's population, and yet today now it's oil. We have new discoveries when we have a free market, and ingenuity and human creativity goes into new endeavors. We figure out how to do things differently, and it changes how much resources we need or what we can extract from the resources we have. So, but this is the viewpoint that many government leaders all around the world have today. They look around and they say, well, fossil fuels, They claim that they're evil. They may even come out and say they're evil and they're causing climate change, all of these things. But they really secretly love the fossil fuels. But here's the thing. They want fossil fuels for themselves to maintain their current lifestyle. They don't want you and me to have those fossil fuels, and they certainly don't want people who are currently living in poverty and some of the poorest nations around the world raising their standard of living and demanding some of these resources too, because then they run out. This is not me speaking. I'm telling you, this is what the belief system is. Then those things would run out and there's none left to support their lifestyle. And the same is true not just of fossil fuels, but things like fertilizers, all the natural resources around the world. So they see high population as a threat to that. They see the use of these things, so they're trying to curtail the use of these things to preserve and conserve those natural resources for themselves. Or they could look to have, less population. If you have any doubt that that's the case, let's take a look at this article right here. This happened, a little over a week ago, and caught the media, took the media by storm. All sorts of people were talking about this, but we had the United States Vice President, Kamala Harris, say something that people said was taken out of context. It says here, Vice President Kamala Harris mistakenly suggested that one of the goals of investing in clean energy is population reduction. Right? And again, we talked about clean energy. We talked before about they use these words, they change the words, they change the vocabulary to make it sound palatable. What do they mean by clean energy? Sometimes they mean solar, but when you look at, say, solar or wind power that they call clean energy, to build these requires fossil fuels that they claim isn't clean, and it requires massive mining and strip mining of the earth. There's not really anything any more clean about those than any other energy source. That just shows the level of propaganda we're dealing with. But anyway, it says here, so Kamala Harris said, when President Biden and I took office, we set an ambitious goal to cut our greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030 and to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Harris told an audience at Coppin State University in Baltimore. When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water. Now, again, she said reduce population. Many people around her said she meant to say reduce pollution. Maybe that's possible. It's possible the teleprompter said pollution and she read population. Mistakes happen. But I tend to believe it's more of a Freudian slip if that was the case, because the people, the leaders of this world, again, this is how they think. And no doubt about it, we're going to read through, and I think you'll come to that conclusion by the time we get to the end of this video, is this is the mindset dominant among world leaders. And that's how we end up with headlines like this. New York becomes the first state to ban natural gas stoves and furnaces in most new buildings. Why? Well, they claim it's to save the environment. But I believe it's because they don't want all that natural gas used by us. They want it used by them and their children and grandchildren. How about this right here? Biden administration targets use of climate warming industrial gases. And it goes on to talk about phasing the use of gases used in refrigerators and air conditioners. Again, why? Because refrigerators and air conditioners, they take energy. It's using up energy, and they think there's a finite supply of this energy. Or we end up with things like this. Massive U.S. oil caverns are now empty and will take decades to refill thanks to Biden. This is an article about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The purpose of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is so that the United States has an emergency reserve of oil in the event of a natural disaster, in the event of a war. They would have this set aside. They wouldn't be dependent on the supply chain, and they would have this oil to be used. But the Biden administration has gotten to the point where it's almost empty. They've gotten rid of so much of this oil, and the claim is, and many people believe, and I'm sure this is a double bonus for them, well, this is helping to keep gasoline prices down in the United States and thus enhance Joe Biden's re-election chances in 2024. And no doubt that's probably one of the aims, but I believe one of the aims is once it's empty, well, then oil prices, what happens to the oil prices after that? Once it can no longer be released and it has to be refilled, well, those prices will skyrocket. What do those skyrocketing prices do? Well, those skyrocketing prices cause poorer people to use less fossil fuels, which is what they want. Again, it's not that they don't want the fossil fuels being used. They just don't want you and me to use them. The global elite, they want to use them. And again, if there's any doubt about that, if you really think, oh no, they really believe in what they're pushing, they really believe that it's going to destroy the planet to use fossil fuels, to fly around in jets and all those things, well, hopefully this story would put that to rest for you. We have here, this is from The Street, it says, caught on camera, climate minister's 328-foot bike ride photo op backfires following claims she flew a private jet and used limos to attend the summit. And so here we have Spanish environmental minister Teresa Ribera, and she goes to this, climate conference that says, according to Falcon Despega, a Spanish jet tracking site, Ribera flew a military-style private plane to the summit and was then escorted by limousines to the location of the summit. Roughly 100 yards before arriving at the destination, however, she hopped out of the limo and got aboard a green e-bike as cameras were rolling. And her escort appeared to have stayed with her the entire time. So here she rides the last 100 yards on this bike, and they've got a car in front of her and a car behind her because, she has to have the security escort because she's a super important person. So they're burning fossil fuel like crazy for this one person to go to this climate summit. And she's supposedly the environmental minister and cares about all this. But what she cares about is photo ops and propaganda. Again, she doesn't dislike fossil fuel. She doesn't loathe it. She doesn't think it's destroying the planet. What she thinks is that your use of it could destroy her lifestyle, the lifestyle she's become accustomed to, as these resources begin to run out, according to their belief system again. But this isn't just limited to oil and other fossil fuels. We also get things like this one right here. We got this from Ag Daily. Irish government looks to cull 200,000 cattle over climate concerns. Now, what is that all about? Because, what is that? You might be able to save on some fossil fuels by making the supply chain for food more local rather than having a global supply chain. Maybe people source their food more locally so it doesn't have to travel as far. But why not promote that? Why are they looking to destroy cattle? Why are they looking to shut down farms? Well, they also, it's not just fossil fuels they see as a limited resource, but fertilizers as well. Fertilizers are natural resources that are mined from the earth, and they are essential to feeding the world today. But they're looking at current rates of mining and thinking, well, when do we run out of that? We need that food for ourselves. So how do we change this? Well, maybe we could feed people insects. Maybe we'll leave the steaks for us, but they can't have steak anymore. They need to eat insects. So again, all of these insane policies that we keep seeing, they're rooted in this idea that the world's natural resources will soon be depleted unless we either have mass amounts of the world population not using those resources, or mass amounts of the world population not here to use those resources. That's what they see as the solution. And of course, they see themselves at the top, enjoying their current lifestyles and probably even an even better lifestyle than what they enjoy now. Oh, they won't take a step back from these things. This is why you see all these climate summits and world leaders, they gather together to talk about the climate. And every single one of them flies in on a private jet and uses, a so-called carbon footprint bigger than what you and I would use in a whole year in just a few hours. So they don't believe this stuff. They're just pushing this stuff to try to get other people to believe it and to be able to wrest control over the globe so that they can solidify their position as the global elite, as the wealthy, and enjoy these lifestyles. I believe this is where all of this is coming from. And again, we read about this, more about this in this article. I'll put a link to this article in the description. Maybe pin it to the comments because it'll give you a little bit more insight into what we're talking about. This is titled The Great Famine Reset. You will own nothing and you will be starving. And I want to cut down to this section right here where it talks about jeopardizing food security for lower emissions. It says these oligarchical plans to compromise food security and destroy property rights are well underway in many countries around the globe. Take, for instance, the example of the Netherlands. A tiny country in terms of land and population, this country is nevertheless the second largest food exporter in the world. And yet, this is all coming soon to an end due to government policies that effectively blame them for high greenhouse gas emissions, despite the nation contributing only 5.2% of all the EU emissions. It's estimated that up to 3,000 farmers could have to close down their productive farms in that country. Writing for The Spectator Australia, Zendu comments, the Dutch policies are particularly puzzling. And again, they're not puzzling when we look at them through this context of Malthusianism. It says, as Dutch farmers are among the most efficient in the world, it is therefore mind-boggling that the Dutch government and the EU would want to uproot this industry rather than to promote and emulate it in a world that is running out of food. But again, that assumes that they don't want the world to run out of food. It assumes that they want the population to be well-fed and grow and enhance its standard of living, but that's not what they want, because in their mind, that would take away valuable resources that they themselves want. It says, unfortunately, the Dutch government is not alone in targeting their farmers. Many countries, including Canada, Germany, and Sri Lanka, are following a similar agenda to undermine the agricultural sector by reducing nitrogen in the environment by at least 30%. So we see, it says, Joshua Phillip, an investigative reporter and recognized expert in asymmetrical hybrid warfare, says nitrogen reduction policies and chemical fertilizer trends in the majority of countries around the world will lead to food shortages like what happened in Sri Lanka recently. So in Sri Lanka, they moved from no use of fertilizers, you're going to do all organic, and maybe under the right conditions, that could have worked over time, but they did this, it was all put in place in the course of 1 year. And of course, they didn't get the crop yields. It was impossible to get the crop yields without the fertilizer. And so they didn't have the food they needed 1 year after they implemented these policies. But why would they implement these policies? Again, they're implementing them because they think the world is going to run out of fertilizer, and they want the fertilizer for themselves. So let's read on. This says global population. It's the World Economic Forum's propaganda of overpopulation and environmental damage that leads governments to implement such rash, insane policies. Absolutely, that's what we've been talking about. It says, how is that going to affect global food supplies? Well, not very well, we suspect. How do we reduce the global demand for resources and limit environmental damage? Well, depopulate the world of humans. We're constantly told that there are too many people on this planet and it can't support everyone. The World Economic Forum has set about implementing an agenda of dramatic depopulation of the world. This has been the program of the Club of Rome, an oligarchical think tank as far back as 1972, when its members were concerned with global resources and overpopulation. And they made all sorts of dire predictions of what would happen a decade into the future, 2 decades into the future. None of it came true, but they still hold on to this ideology. It says renowned primatologist Jane Goodall said at the WEF in 2020, all these environmental things we talk about wouldn't be a problem if the world was the size of the population that was there 500 years ago. In 1600, the world population is estimated to have been 500 to 580 million people. That means 94% fewer humans than we have today. We're meant to believe that reducing the world's population to 500 million will relieve the environment of the stress on both resources and environmental damage. And guys, that is what they think. That's what's driving a lot of these world leaders. Again, there's other things. Power. Power is a big one. You know, obviously, Satan and his demons are behind much of this agenda. All of this agenda, frankly. But many of these people are unaware of that. Some of them are, but some of them aren't. So what's driving them? What's driving them is this ideology, this belief that the world's natural resources are going to be depleted and there aren't enough resources to support the global population. So that's why they're pushing these policies. And again, if you have any doubt, let's look at this article from a few years ago in The Guardian. It was titled The Meaning of Life in a World Without Work. And it says, as technology renders jobs obsolete, what will keep us busy? As if the purpose of life is just to do a job, right? It says, Sapiens author Yuval Noah Harari, who's a friend of the World Economic Forum, examines the, quote, the useless class and a new quest for purpose. Guys, that's how you and I are viewed. That's how everybody outside of this billionaire, wealthy elite, jet set class views the rest of us, as we are the useless class. And I'm sure when Yuval Noah Harari says things like that, he doesn't count himself, right, as part of that useless class. It's all the rest of us that are part of that useless class. And so they see us as just sort of taking up space. There's other quotes that he's given in the past about giving people drugs and video games to take care of these useless eaters over here. So it shows where this thought process is and how much of humanity is viewed by the global elite. We're just taking up space. We're taking up resources that don't need to be taken up, resources that should be used by them because they are the brilliant ones, and we're just the useless class. And so that's why you see all of these other things pushed forward, like transhumanist ideals and artificial intelligence, all these different technologies, because they see those as able to replace a large segment of the human population that they rely on to supply the labor to create the things that give them the lifestyle that they enjoy. So it's not just the natural resources, but how do those natural resources turn into the things that that wealthy elite class uses to maintain their lifestyle? Well, that requires a lot of workers. Well, if we can get rid of those workers and they aren't taking up the natural resources, again, this is the mindset that these people have, guys, and it's a mindset that drives them to get control on a global basis to be able to put an end to all this. Again, the United States is seen as a threat Because think of all the propaganda you've seen over the years. Well, the United States is only this percentage of the world's population, but they use this percentage of the world's resources, right? Nothing about all of the wealth creation and standard of living, all of the wonderful things created by the United States through a free market enterprise system. But no, they're just destroying the world's resources. And so they push all of these different plans to try to put an end to that, get control of that. And guys, they're going to be pushing central bank digital currencies. Already the central bankers are talking about climate change as part of their policy objectives. So all of this stems into getting control so that really we can eat the bugs while they fly around in jets and eat steak. So again, it's not, they don't really believe the propaganda they're preaching. They're deceiving the world. This is all part of a plan to take over and to conserve these resources for themselves. I'm just telling you, this is the mindset that they have. It's not one I subscribe to. But guys, all of this that we see going on, it just points to the times in which we live and says, guys, Jesus could come back at any moment. So make sure that you know him, that you have a relationship with Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. That's the most important thing you can do. Don't let all the stuff get you down. You know, God laughs at this type of stuff. Read Psalm 2. Armies of the world gather together to do battle against the Lord, and he just laughs. So we need to be doing the same thing. We need to have our eyes focused on Jesus, who is our hope in this dark world. So guys, what do you think? Am I way off base? Maybe there's something else driving all of this, and Malthusianism has nothing to do with any of it. If you think that, leave your comments below. Let me know what you think. Make sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. And God willing, I'll see you next time. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Brit Gillette on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.